Hi there. As you know, antinatalism is a big feature of the Church of Nowhere, but there's no doubt that antinatalism has its fair share of vociferous critics, some of them extremely hostile to antinatalism. And so I think, generally speaking, Danny Shine of Social Experimentalist has his work cut out there for him, really, if he wants to mobilize people to stop reproducing. Um, I mean, there are the usual. I mean, obviously there are smart asses, okay, and the smart asses say things like, "Oh, Johnny Shine, why don't you commit suicide?" Then there'd be one less human being to pollute the planet, right? Okay, you get all that. Now, some people do point out who's going to look after me when I'm 90, when I'm 93, and point out that problems of aging population, which is a big problem at the moment. We'll come back to that in a moment. So you always get your smart asses. Why don't you commit suicide? Why don't you cut your balls off? Things. Oops, sorry. Why don't you emasculate yourself and things like that? And many of the things, of course, that he wants, like free contraception, is already kind of available anyway, really, but not as available as perhaps it could be or should be. But anyway, so on to the critics. Well, first of all, the demographic specialists. Did I spell that right? Demographic, yeah. And they talk about the aging population, which you may have heard is also is a really, really big issue at the moment, especially with regard to pension contributions. And maybe the Chinese would also chime in at this and say we're critics of antinatalism because we had one child policy and now we're in trouble because we have an aging population. So aging population is very much the buzzword of the moment. And a lot of young people are saying, why should we have to pay contributions to keeping old people alive now when we're not going to have any pensions when we get older, which is a very serious problem, in fact. And not only that, but an aging population means that there's more care services required, and more actually in the way of geriatric psychiatry, which basically means people that are dealing with dementia. And that apparently is going to have to come into. There's going to have to be more of them about. And so people do ask the question, if there aren't going to be any young people around, how are we going to manage? How is geriatric care going to be facilitated? You'll see. And this is a great problem. How's it going to be paid for? But I suppose the answer is really that if people didn't have children and didn't send them to school and they wouldn't need to educate anyone, except themselves possibly, they would actually have more money to save up to put into private pension funds and to save up for private health care insurance for when they do need it for when they're older. Plus, also, I suppose if there's less taxation going into education, then more taxation would go into geriatric care. And also, other people then say, getting a bit futurist about it, say, well, there'll be robots and androids and things to take care of you when you are older. I think I remember a film about that, someone being taken care of by a robot. Anyway, I've forgotten what that's called now. Very, very interesting film. But so you'd have all that, the androids and everything. But then who'd fix the androids? They went wrong, and there wouldn't be people to do all this kind of thing because there wouldn't be any young people, you see. But anyway, so aging population is a great, very, very great problem. In fact, an aging population is a problem of the world. It's not just that there is more people in the world, there's more old people in the world, more people that need healthcare in the world, everywhere. So, in fact, one of the critics of antinatalism is it would simply make the problem of aging population even worse than it is, which the Chinese might actually agree with, because they've abandoned one child policy now, and people are just free to do whatever they however many children they can afford, or even children they can't afford. Which of course is the basis of contraception, is to try and make people not have children when they can't afford to have them. But everybody has to be able to afford to have some kind of geriatric care. However, there is another aspect to this, which is actually the subject of another video on the responsibility of keeping yourself healthy, which we'll come on to again. So these are sort of critics of antinatalism. The Chinese are a new bunch of critics, and you've got these demographic specialists who talk about the aging problem. And then you come on to the people slightly more wacky, of course, is the people that are like Alex Jones and other people like that. And they are very, very hostile to antinatalism. In fact, I would probably say that they would go so far as to say that Danny Shine is an Illuminatus and would cross themselves if they came upon him, because there's a large section of truthers out there, of people believe in this new world order, that really, really very seriously believe that there is a conspiracy to depopulate the earth. So, I mean, they're going against everybody by saying that there should be more people on the earth, and there is a terrible conspiracy afoot to reduce the population. And now various reasons are given for this, so that the elite basically don't have so many mouths to feed. And Alex Jones goes on about the gay community, that they're behind this this conspiracy to depopulate the earth. And there's other people that go so far as to say that the reptile aliens are going to invade Earth soon. And so, of course, if there's less people, there's less resistance to their invasion, you see. And people will, so things like that. So there's lots of wacky theories coming out as to why the elites of the world are trying to depopulate the Earth. But it's really, really, so they're really, really hostile to antinatalists. As I say, they see the antinatalist movement as literally devil worshipping in the pay of the Illuminati and the New World Order. So you're not going to get much support from that section of the population. But I suppose the biggest group of people are, of course, the mainstream world religions and external religion generally, really, which is this sort of crossed out thing here that I've got. And they're very much in a bubble. But there are millions of them, millions and millions. And of course, they just simply say that their sacred scriptures go out and say that you must multiply, be fruitful and multiply. To quote, I think, the Old Testament. And they would say, yes, we need to do that. They would point out the fact, again, that your children, the whole idea of having children is that they will support you when you're old. They will take over the family business. They will work in the family business. They will expand the family business. Will make your life a lot easier when you are too old and too feeble to look after yourself. And, that is the purpose of having children, in actual fact. It isn't for their benefit, it's for your benefit, to put it rather crudely. They talk about the god of fertility. God created the world, and God wants you to have lots of children. Also, they would say you need lots of young children, young people around to make things happen. And what happens if there's a global pandemic or some sort of global disaster, like global warming, for example, global climate change, for example, although most religions actually poo-poo that. But you're going to need a huge population, because if there's a pandemic and literally like 60% of people die, you're going to need a lot of young people to rebuild the broken society, you see. But that's slightly off topic, or slightly neither here nor there as far as religionists are concerned. That would sort of be more the people that were smart asses that would say, if it was a disaster, we would need lots of people to replace the population. Like literally if enough people died because of a pandemic, you literally wouldn't have enough people to make the human race viable. So you're talking about human extinction anyway. But antinatalists, of course, reply by saying that we shouldn't have been born in the first place, and human extinction is no bad thing as far as the planet's concerned. When you think of a balance between the number of species of plant and animal that are being destroyed by the human race, if the human race died out, on balance, you see, there would be more life left on this planet if there wasn't human life, you see. So in fact, human life is actually detrimental to the life of the planet overall and on balance. So in terms of biomass or in terms of number of species, it would be better if human beings had never existed. So the sooner they come to an end, the better for the actual planet. Well, of course, as you can imagine, this is complete heresy as far as most religions are concerned, because human beings are made in God's image, and God cares about human beings more than any other species on Earth, obviously, because we are Adam and Eve. And although we are supposed to be stewards of the Earth, as it says in the Quran, I mean, ultimately, human beings matter more to God than any other species, to put it rather bluntly. And it really doesn't matter what. And then, of course, if you're evangelical, born again Christian, then this earth is going to be destroyed and made again anyway. And so, therefore, caring about what happens to this planet makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, because it's going to be recreated anew and in perfection, you see. And anyway, so so another big lot of people, a lot of critics are white supremacists, actually, of which there are quite a few in the USA and perhaps in Europe as well. And they say, of course, that it's just typical of the white races to make themselves extinct, but everybody else, all the other races, can go on breeding away. And in actual fact, they say that there's a conspiracy by the Chinese and Indonesians and Indians and Africans to actually commit who actually want to destroy all white people, basically. I can't think of the word. Sorry. Anyway, they want to destroy the entire white race. So they are encouraging gayness, for example. They are encouraging whites to be antinatalist and to have only small families, because they want to breed themselves, and they literally want to breed the white race into extinction. And they usually cite the thing about Neanderthal man as a subspecies of man, of Homo erectus, I think, being destroyed by Cro-Magnon. So Cro-Magnon was a species that actually literally destroyed the Neanderthal, and so the white races will be literally destroyed by the breeding races, especially the black races, of course, which have an agenda to pay back the white races for enslaving them, you see. So they have a very, very powerful message in the USA, and I suspect really that they are connected with the depopulation theorists, only they see it as a white depopulation conspiracy rather than a worldwide depopulation conspiracy. And then finally, the critics, what I call culturalists. And I suppose I'm a little bit of a culturalist, really, in the sense that, I recognise that there are cultural differences between a lot of people of different race, let us put it like that. But my argument against antinatalism, even though I'm an antinatalist, is it is really looking at it it bounces off the white supremacist racist ideas, which of course are intolerable and horrible, but they do raise a very interesting point, which is basically that unless you got every human culture from every race and every part of the world anti-natalist, and bringing out legislation to make it impossible or difficult to reproduce. And unless you change the world's norms, values, and beliefs to make them anti-natalist, you might as well forget it, because it's no good just doing it in your corner of the earth if everybody is not going to follow suit. But then I suppose you could argue, well, if you're a white person and your white race is annihilated, you won't mind because you won't be having any children, so they won't mind because they won't exist, which is a fair point to make. But I still think that people, you see, in Western Europe are not going to stop having children, basically, unless the whole world stops having children with them. It's the same argument that people bring out against banning the arms trade. Well, it's no good Britain banning the arms trade if everybody else is still going on trading arms. It's no good Britain banning nuclear weapons if everybody else is going to develop them. And there's no point in talking about high wages unless every worker in the world is going to enjoy high wages, because the corporations will simply go to where the lowest wages are, and all other things being equal, will put their factories there, as we all know they do, and as we all know they have been doing that for 30 or 40 years, in fact, completely unchecked, which is the reason why Brexit is such an issue, etc., etc. So it is one of these arguments. Well, of course, you could say, well, in that case, nobody would have banned slavery, because Britain wouldn't have banned slavery because other people were still having slaves. And in fact, that was the argument that a lot of people in Britain gave for not banning slavery, is because everybody else, had slaves, and therefore Britain was putting itself at an economic disadvantage. And indeed, that argument was so strong, it actually resisted the anti-slavery movement for half a century. And it was really only on a technicality that Britain actually, in the end, banned slavery, or began to ban it. And then after it did, it became normative to be anti-slavery, if you see what I mean. So I suppose eventually it would become normative to be anti-natalist, in actual fact. And everybody would believe, in fact, that it was immoral to have children, and your own children anyway, and it was more moral to care for care for older people, or old people, rather than young people, and better to care for old people than for children. So I mean, it's a complex subject, and of course, population studies are very, very complex indeed, and there's a whole bunch of factors that have to be put into the equation, really. But antinatalism does have its critics, and I think people just have this kind of an emotional repugnance of antinatalism, because they think babies are cute, and why can't I have children anyway? Who are you to tell me not to, sort of thing. Go away, like, I'm going to do what I like with my body. It's my body. I can become pregnant if I want to be. I can have an abortion if I want to. I can use contraception if I want to. But it's all to do what I want to do. You can't tell me. But the fact is that you know very well that governments and corporations and mass media could actually be completely antinatalist if they wanted to be, and then the whole population, vast populations of communities, would actually just fall into line. It's like people said in Ireland, for example, you could never ban smoking, from public places and bars and restaurants. They just did it overnight. There was a ban. And everybody just complied, more or less. I mean, a lot of restaurants and pubs went out of business, all right, immediately after the ban. So there was an economic impact and also an impact on employment. But everybody just accepted it. Everybody just fell in line and said, all right, we won't smoke. There's a ban on smoking, that's it. So it shows that quite draconian measures can be taken and accepted by your populace, who just meekly fall into line and don't actually talk about libertarian issues at all. Because I suppose it was so clear that smoking was a big problem. especially in public places, that you weren't just harming your own health, you were harming the health of other people and employees, you see, that it was just accepted. Very strong argument. So if you have a strong argument and you can meet all your criticisms strongly, in fact, you can introduce legislation to make anything possible. And I suppose that if you had a raft of legislation sensibly put with all the economic impacts studies in place to show that antinatalism was logical and possible, and didn't have a detrimental effect on society and on economy, then I think you'd be on to a winner here, actually. So I think there's pretty much all to play for as far as the antinatalists are concerned.